Imagine a program, one that's supposed to feed hungry kids, suddenly loses $250 million.
We're $250 million.
Yeah, $250 million. And it's laundered into luxury cars, overseas real estate, kickbacks. That's a huge crime. But the real story, the part that's just wild, is how government policy and even a court order helped it happen.
It's a perfect, really a tragic storm. You have massive opportunism meeting a complete policy failure. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme in Minnesota.
Which the Department of Justice has called the largest COVID-related fraud they've uncovered so far.
To date, yes. And our sources today really dissect the anatomy of this crime. We're talking the regulatory vacuum, the legal mandates that actually sped up the theft, and, of course, the political fallout that's still happening.
And it is still happening. I mean, the details are so fresh. This investigation just keeps getting wider. Just this week, they charged the 78th defendant, a man named Abdirashid Bixi-Dul.
Right. And Dul's case is it's a perfect little microcosm of the whole scheme. He cooperated 2 nonprofits and is accused of stealing over $1 million by claiming to run these totally fake food sites.
And the claims were just brazen. The court documents show he claimed to serve over 40,000 meals to children.
Every single week.
Every week. Let's just focus on the geography of one of those claims because it's so absurd. His Bilal site in Pelican Rapids, a very small town in outstate Minnesota, he claimed to serve 6,000 meals a day there.
6,000 meals daily. If you actually look at the population of Pelican Rapids, I mean, everyone, kids and adults, it's less than half of that. The claim is more than double the entire town's population.
It's statistically impossible.
It is. I mean, think about the logistics. To serve 6,000 meals a day, you need a huge staff, a massive kitchen, inventory. It just doesn't add up.
And yet the money flowed. And that's the heart of our deep dive today.
Wow.
How does a fraud this big, this obvious, over $250 million happen? And the sources show us it's because the system's checks were deliberately removed.
Exactly. This wasn't just some minor waste. This was an industrial-scale exploitation of taxpayer money that went straight to personal profit.
Okay, let's unpack that. The initial failure, the regulatory avalanche that kicked all of this off.
Right. So you have the Federal Child Nutrition Program. It's designed to help low-income kids. But when COVID hit and school shut down, everything had to change fast.
And the intention was good, right? Get food to kids who aren't in school.
The intention was absolutely noble. The USDA prioritized speed, getting access to food above all else, but in doing that, they relaxed nearly every single standard requirement.
So these weren't loopholes people found. These were deliberate policy waivers.
Deliberate.
Yeah.
And our sources point to 2 specific waivers that, when you put them together, just blew the doors wide open for fraud.
Okay, what was the first one?
The first major failure was allowing for-profit businesses to participate. Historically, these programs were for nonprofits.
So mission-driven organizations.
Exactly. But overnight, for-profit restaurants, new LLCs, they could all enroll and start claiming huge federal reimbursements.
So you introduce a pure profit motive into a system that suddenly has no real oversight.
You've got it. And that brings us to the second, maybe even more critical, failure. They dismantled verification. The second waiver allowed food to be distributed off-site.
Meaning not in a school cafeteria or a community center?
Right. It could be a parking lot,
Yeah.
a warehouse, anywhere. So how could a state administrator possibly verify how many meals were served, or even if they were served?
The core checks were just gone.
Gone. Profit motive unlocked. Verification system disabled.
The numbers really tell the story here. In 2019, before the waivers, Feeding Our Future gave out about $3.4 million.
Okay, now fast forward 2 years. By 2021, with the waivers in effect, that number skyrocketed to almost $200 million.
Wow.
It's an explosive increase, and is driven entirely by those policy changes. In total, they stole over $240 million because the door was legally propped open for them.
And at the exact same time, state government employees in Minnesota were working from home, which made it even harder for the Minnesota Department of Education to do any kind of physical oversight. They were basically grounded. So the door's open. Let's look at how they actually did it, the mechanics of the theft.
Well, it was shockingly low-tech. The whole thing was based on the idea that no one could possibly check all the paperwork.
Yeah.
So they just submitted fraudulent invoices for food that was never, ever purchased.
And the paperwork they did submit was, almost comically lazy. Tell us about the attendance rosters.
This is where you see the real cynicism. They had to prove they were serving thousands of kids. So in one case, investigators found a spreadsheet roster used a computer formula.
A formula.
A formula to insert a random number between 7 and 17 in the age column for each child.
No way! They automated the lie.
They did. They literally randomized the children they claimed to be feeding.
Yeah.
And surveillance confirmed it all. A site claiming 6,000 meals a day might have, 40 or 50 people show up.
The rest just went straight into their pockets.
Absolutely. The money laundering was immediate.
So where did it go?
Straight to personal enrichment. For example, one entity, Safari Restaurant, got about $15 million in federal funds. That money didn't go to food costs. It was funneled directly to shell companies controlled by the owners.
And they went on a shopping spree.
A huge one.
Yeah.
We're talking an $87,000 Chevy pickup truck, a house bought with almost $1 million in cash, and luxury real estate in Minnesota, but also in Kenya and Turkey.
And the criminality didn't stop there. It actually went into the courtroom during the first trial.
It's extraordinary. An attempt was made to bribe a juror.
With what?
With $120,000 in cash.
Mm.
A bag of cash to get a vote for acquittal.
Unbelievable.
Thankfully, the juror reported it immediately. The jury was sequestered. But it just shows they thought the entire system, from the program to the courts, was for sale.
The story takes such an infuriating turn when you realize the state agency, the Minnesota Department of Education, or MDE, they actually figured it out. They tried to stop it.
They did. They saw the claims exploding, and they tried to put the brakes on in late 2020. They halted payments.
But Feeding Our Future, the organization at the center of all this, they didn't just go away.
No, they fought back. Hard. They sued the MDE. They accused the state of unlawfully withholding their money.
And this is where it got really political.
Yeah.
The leader of FOF, Amy Bach, she's been convicted since, but she didn't just argue procedure.
No, she made a very strategic accusation. She accused the state of discriminating against the Somali community, which was heavily involved in running many of these food sites.
And that accusation carried a lot of weight.
It did. The sources say it caused this hesitancy inside the state agencies. They were afraid of the political backlash, afraid of being called discriminatory.
So they were paralyzed. And then a judge got involved.
This is the most shocking part. In spring 2021, a Minnesota judge ruled there was, and I'm quoting, no legal basis for the MDE to stop the payments.
The judge forced them to keep paying.
Forced them. And then, months later, it got worse. The judge held the MDE in contempt of court for processing applications too slowly.
In contempt for trying to do due diligence on what turned out to be massive fraud.
Not only in contempt, they were fined. The court ordered the MDE to pay a fine of $47,500 to Feeding Our Future.
Wait, the state agency trying to protect taxpayer money was forced to pay the very organization defrauding the system.
That's right. That judicial pressure is what forced the MDE to speed everything up, and it directly enabled the fraud to balloon to that $200 million level in 2021.
But, what's the counter-argument there? That in a crisis, you have to prioritize speed, that slow bureaucracy means hungry kids don't get fed.
That's the tension, exactly. The MDE was caught. The federal rules demanded speed, but their job was to protect taxpayer funds. The judge's ruling basically said procedural speed was more important than preventing obvious rampant fraud. The whole system failed to protect itself.
So let's look at the fallout. I mean, the fiscal and political damage here is just immense.
It is. A sentencing judge in one of the cases said it best. He said, public trust in government programs has significantly decreased.
And what about the money? The taxpayer money?
It's mostly gone. Of the $250 million plus that was stolen, they've only managed to recover about $75 million so far. The rest was spent, or it's overseas, probably beyond reach.
And you can't ignore how close this was to the local political power structure. The head of FOF, Amy Bach, had connections to Minneapolis politicians.
Yes, including the mayor, Jacob Frey, and a state senator. And it wasn't just, casual connections. A senior policy aide to Mayor Frey, Abdi Nursala, he pled guilty to wire fraud himself.
For stealing $1 million from the program for real estate.
Right. When the corruption is that close to the city's political core, it really shakes public confidence.
And finally, this whole thing has become a political flashpoint on the national stage, especially around immigration.
Yes, and we should be very clear here, just reporting what the sources say. Former President Donald Trump has used this, attacking Somalis in Minnesota, threatening to end temporary protected status.
And on the other side, you have local leaders like Representative Ilhan Omar condemning those attacks.
Correct. They argue that you can't blame an entire community for the crimes of a few individuals and that the Somali community is a vital part of America.
So the fraud itself, which was of a government failure, gets turned into this divisive political weapon.
It does. And that shifts the focus away from the fundamental systemic failures that allowed $250 million to be stolen in the first place.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you? The key lesson here seems unmistakable. You had these reckless regulatory changes from the USDA that created the vulnerability.
Hmm.
And then when the state agency tried to do its job, it was legally handcuffed and even fined for it. This theft, this $250 million theft, it's just a stunning example of the cost you pay when you prioritize speed over any real accountability.
And that really leaves us with the final crucial question. The scale of this and the fact that the government was literally penalized for trying to stop it, it reveals this deep vulnerability in how we handle emergency relief. So when the next crisis hits, how do we ensure that speed doesn't automatically invite this kind of systemic corruption? What checks can we build in so that oversight agencies are empowered, not punished, for doing their jobs no matter what political accusations get thrown at them? I think the whole idea of crisis funding needs a fundamental rethink.